let me introduce the next panel. We went from the journeys to the on-ramp. Now we're on the on-ramp. So this is the LSO on-ramp for non-automated service providers. So those who have not yet gone through the journey part. So the great panelists we have for this, as you could see, is first John Carr from TransUnion. And John is Vice President of Business Development. John, you up with us? Thank you. Thank you. And Michael Kearns, who was on earlier, is co-founder and Chief Strategy Officer from Amartus. Thank you. Thanks. Okay.
Sorry, John. That's all right. Left me hanging already.
So, like I said, we went from the journey, now we're going to the on-ramp, and talk about the things that happen next, right, in the LSO sphere. And I believe that there are some slides here, so we're going to see.
Don't worry about them.
Huh?
You don't need to worry about them.
We don't need them?
No.
Okay. We just had an executive decision. We are not putting the slides up.
There's only two of us if we have to kill time at the end.
Yeah. Well, we're going to kill time. We have a lot to talk about, right?
Yeah.
A lot to talk about today. So let's start with, as an LSO provider. So now we've talked to the service providers and what they're challenged with, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and what they think some of the things that need to happen or should happen eventually after 10 years. So now we're at the point where we can talk as your LSO solutions provider perspective of what would you recommend as kind of the essential first steps for a service provider that has little or no automation, so maybe they're still on the ASRs and the swivel chairs and all, but they really have a high interest in looking at LSO implementations and seeing where they go from there. So you want to address that?
So I think number one is participation. So many of the smaller providers have sat back with I have low volume. Sometimes I'm the incumbent, I'm going to get the orders either way. So there's that hesitation to make the investments or even feel that they need the automation. So again, participation, these folks have got to get involved with MEF or whatever standards body is driving the types of products that they're interested in. Start talking to the experts, start collaborating with solution providers like ourselves. More importantly, start talking to your larger trading partners, find out what their plans are, what their plans for MEF, what their plans for automation are, get in tune with them. Start with a pilot project, but you have to get started. Yeah. You have to be in this ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I mean, we were on a journey as well, building out our solutions for this and learning as we went. One of the things I think we got right at the start when we were developing our solutions was we built full-blown solutions for MEF LSO processes. So we talk about APIs, but they're really business processes, And what we found is then when we go, and it wasn't just small providers, it's a provider starting small as well. It could be a big provider, but they're trying to get onto the train, as we talked about just earlier, And sometimes they didn't have the back office. Even some big providers didn't have it there. So what we were able to do is offer them a sort of a standalone solution, whereby they, if they're supplying into a buyer, the buyer could send them LSO requests. And the system could be used to automate, semi-automate, and even in the case of ordering, sort of manually allow them to respond in a completely standards compliant manner. So really allow them to start small. And so there were two things I think about that. One was we had two kind of scenarios. We had kind of big providers who had problems with their back office. They could maybe do a few of the APIs, but they couldn't do all. And so we were able to augment that with some means to get them on board, allow them to automate.
Okay.
The other side we saw was some providers were sort of saying, and this is coming up more often, is they're saying, well, my suppliers are non-automated, they're not interested. So we said, actually, why don't you stand up a seller for that guy, and you send the requests to him via a portal essentially, or a solution where they have to have loaded in and configured some of their information. So in fact, you're aiding your supplier because to you it's a beneficial thing to do. So that's like examples of how creatively you can overcome the barriers that the back office automation isn't there, and get people onto the train, as we said earlier.
Yeah, I would say it's, we came at it from the other side. We have a full-blown kind of work order management inventory, and then we looked at APIs as toolkits to that functionality. It's no easier to get the point across of automation, whether you did it from the API without that back office, or you provide a full solution for that smaller provider. It's really the automation journey and not the API journey. And as in everything you probably heard up to here today, it's the legacy systems. I cured one problem, but I'm still swivel chairing in. So we took it from the focus of we can help with deprecation of internal systems, and LSO API is a way to talk to your partners, not fix all your back office.
Right. Well, I mean, legacy systems aren't going away rapidly, completely. So, but you're making some progress getting there in terms of at least incenting people. How do you incent someone, or a company that wants to get involved, but they're still not sold on it at this point because they see they have the internal groups that are, kind of struggling with just, keeping up with quotes, like we talked about. You can have tons of quotes. It's easy to do quotes if you just push the button, right? And how do you foresee, or how are you dealing with that kind of, sales process?
Yeah, it can be a long one, and for the type of system we have, that's beyond just the, providing the API. That's always the first thing we hear is we can tell when somebody's actually getting interested and serious about automation, and then what happens in the journey as well. There's not a point in me fixing ordering if I haven't fixed the big volume of quoting. So then that starts that slowdown process. So it's just one that you have to continue to work with folks and show the value that those orders are still going on. You still have unhappy customers. You still have slow revenue recognition, whatever it is in the process, and just stay there involved and show that, although it's an incremental process and they're probably doing the right thing with quotes and fixing some of that first. It's not like you can wait another couple of years to fix the order side. There's so many other things from the order side as NaaS grows, and service orchestration. There's so many key pieces of information and milestones that are flowing in that order system that can trigger those automation and orchestration systems, that it's not, you're holding up not just the automation of the ordering, but you're holding up potentially more important parts of the process of orchestration, service activation, those types of things.
I mean, I can think of two things. One is to, first of all, show them that there's a way to do it in a phased manner with the, capped investment, and see as it grows. So, for example, the commercial model of how we as solution vendors operate is also very important. Is that you're not like asking for a big outlay, to get on board into the ecosystem, and that when you get on board, you can, you start seeing the orders, and the order volume in itself says, okay, well, maybe now we're seeing more orders, so we can actually do more, invest more in the integration in the back office systems and the updating of the back office system. Whereas I think a lot of people think about the APIs and they say, I'm going to have to actually spend a whole lot of money here, and I don't know what the outcome is, or how quick I'm going to start getting a return on this. But there are ways to get into the ecosystem without spending all of that outlay initially. That's the key message here. And for you, it's also about starting the journey of standardizing how you as a seller are addressing your outbound towards your customer. And it's equally important on the other side, from the buyer perspective. So you can do the same thing.
Yeah, focus on transactional-based models versus large IT software licensing and investment.
Yes. Yeah.
And definitely the integration costs into the back office system, that's the most expensive thing to do.
Yep.
Because you've got to, as John said, you've got to figure out what's going on in that back office system. You've got to sit down with all the people, consult with them. And that is an expensive process.
I'm sure. So how much of that is relative to the internal, your customers' resources and your resources? I mean, how does that work typically?
I was going to say it often brings together resources that have never worked together before or haven't worked together in a long time, and now they need to get together and start looking at they don't even know what their processes are in the extent that they've been running the processes, but nobody's analyzed how they might do things differently, and so it is a consultation exercise for the internal team. So there's the cost of what we can bring to them as solution providers, but there's also a huge, pretty significant internal cost. So again, I think capping it to some degree and then sort of onboarding it bit by bit allows you to also upskill your own internal teams, get the buy-in. A lot of times when we would do an implementation, we've learned that we need to engage the operations very early on, for example. If we don't do that, you can launch the solution and they go, hang on a sec, I don't know what this means for me, how to operate this. So it's really important to engage them at the early part of the journey.
Right. Different groups.
Different groups in
different budgets.
Different groups, different budgets. Finding that has always been one of the things that plagued this in this in the telecom industry is the stovepiping of systems and ownership of them, and those groups over the years not talking about where things should be going as a whole. So yeah, it's it can be difficult without a champion that's holding the budget or holding some power to bring those groups together. We run into those same challenges, but so it's key to show that it's not the way that we put our platform out. You can use as much of it or as little of it, and bring that in with people that there's an opportunity to get one group using some portion of the system that can then show benefits. So that's another tact we take. But other than that, those challenges that have always been within telecom engineering and operations and IT kind of butting heads.
Right. Security, that's another one. So, so going forward, what about the smaller connectivity suppliers, especially when we haven't talked about NaaS? Like, how does this fit in with NaaS going forward?
Well, I mean, obviously, you need all your suppliers to be somewhat automated, because otherwise there's going to be a very slow, they're going to be the slowest in the chain, right? So I think even if you're only passing them a certain number of orders, you want to have a standardized process anyway, whether they can respond as quick as some of the bigger guys with the automated back office systems is another question. But there are things and ways, as I mentioned, to be able to do that, sort of to allow them to automate. And I think fundamentally they all need to be in the NaaS ecosystem, big or small.
Has that been part of the buyer discussions in terms of what's ahead, after the LSO implementations? If they look to what needs to be done to look at network as a service pieces too.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it is. When we look at from our side where we sit in the kind of the quote to order. Inventory trouble ticketing, those inventory systems have to become part of this as well, right? When we talk about NaaS and simplification of building a service at the point of sale and customers coming in. There's so much more beyond just the quoting and the ordering. That somehow became a very simple part when you look at what you're really trying to achieve with, and especially with an ecosystem of those smaller providers and where they are in the system. But dipping into live inventories off of things like quoting and ordering have to become part of that chain. So it changes the thought of what was an ordering or a quoting system to be part of NaaS has to change as to what systems it talks to in the whole organization.
I think as Scott mentioned on the last panel that one of the things that's very important is to have the milestones of the orders and things like that. I think to have a consistent interaction with all of your suppliers is very, very very important step, regardless of whether you can expect an immediate response from that supplier or not. You're improving the situation dramatically if you can have the same consistent level of information going back, and that's where the standard comes in. So you should try to do whatever you can to assist those smaller suppliers to do it, and that might be you standing up a supplier application or seller application for those guys, and allowing them to easily come on board and register their offering with you, so that you can have that upstream, for your upstream customer, have that consistent information provided. And to me, that is NaaS. That's a NaaS. Like I think NaaS will go through several phases, and one of those phases is get everybody onto the same page and have the same amount of information. Now I started trying to understand, can I speed it up? But not everybody's ready to go. Speed and on demand as we talk about NaaS, but I think from where we're coming from, this will be a fundamental change, basically.
A first step on the journey. A step, maybe not first step, but it's something coming up.
Yeah, and to add to that, thinking the previous panel, increase in some of those milestones and standardization, but the more people and the more type of network builders, one of the things that isn't addressed in the MEF standard or the original ASOG standard is things like special construction, last mile builds. Everything comes to a grinding halt at that point, and the orders start to go down separate roads. One goes into a group that says, I'll get back to you in 6 months when we figure out what we're going to do with construction. People want orders in. Those types of things, also have to be in the next steps of how we're going to expand on some of these standards, because those are, whether it's a 6-month build or it's a riser or it's a lateral of 100 feet, these are all things that bring the order process kind of to a halt, and people start to lose information. So there still has to be a lot of work done in that, and I think more inclusion of the people that are really the incumbents in the smaller areas and those smaller providers can lend expertise as to how that could be helped, but another reason why we need to get them in.
Yeah, I think Bertrand also mentioned that the strategy there now that they've got a cohort of a significant capacity of their suppliers on board is to deepen that capability, so you can start to get more richer information about what's going on. It's been one of the big gaps, and I think MEF have implemented the milestones inside of the order. So associated with each product, you can specify whatever milestones are relevant there. So the kind of thing that John was talking about, the construction, you can have multiple milestones in construction. The benefit for the customer is that they get this feedback. So they're not just sitting there thinking the order might have been cancelled or nobody's doing anything. You have a consistent way of knowing that week by week or whatever length it takes that you're actually making progress, and you can make calls in the meantime if you don't see it moving. So that's good.
Right. Well, there are pieces that can't be automated, like
absolutely,
like construction per se. In some respects it can, but not.
The
press a button.
standardizing the expected responses, the time of responses. Doesn't accelerate the construction, but it can help to provide a better experience for the customer. So there's still ways to expand it. So.
You agree. What did you agree about? Construction. Oh, okay. Yeah, takes time. Trenching, a lot of work. All right. So I'm sorry. Were you finished with that, John?
No.
Oh. Okay.
I'm not going past the applause. I'm good.
With the construction, yeah. So, so we have about 3 minutes left, a little more than 3, and we did have some slides. You don't want to look at the slides, I think.
No, that's all right.
Not bad. But so going forward, then, what what's your expectation of how long it's going to take, going forward for, I know that's a tough question. There's no real answer, but
62
now. You're going to retire.
Looks like you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. No, I think
See it out.
I came back from Capacity EU 2 weeks ago. Just in the last 3 years, we see a lot more people getting serious about at least MEF implementation, various APIs of wherever they are in their journey. So we do see that increasing. We still take the tact of we have a automation platform that Sonata is an interface, Cantata is an interface. These are tools. So in that approach, we look at it as if you make that move towards automation, if you have one trading partner that wants Sonata, we activate Sonata. You haven't fixed your back office to take a Sonata payload directly into your BS, we'll translate it into what you want. So we've tried to focus to get that early adoption, whether it's small or large. If somebody's hung up in that, I don't have volumes, but I'm getting pressure, we try to provide a solution that says, if you're, as Scott had talked about, we're actively working the trial with AT&T and them. So we're translating MEF into ASR and back and forth. So whether it's that or a non-standard or you have an OSBS challenge, we look at that any-to-any as a translator. It lets you start, so think about it if you're a buyer and you want to buy everything MEF. We all know that's not a reality today, but if you've done the work on your back end, then we provide a solution that says you can buy from everybody the same way. We'll translate it until your partners start to come on board. You have the volume, you want to move direct, we understand that, move direct. But we're trying to provide a way that smaller buyers can get into this ecosystem without the larger investment, but still be able to talk to any trading partner across any interface and not make those large initial investments, turn it into a operational mimicking transactional based solution.
Okay, that's a great way to wrap up the on-ramp for non-automated service providers. So they're going to become more automated in the future.
Yep. So the big key message is there are ways for you to get onto the train, and it's not so expensive, and you can do it in a measured way. That's, I think, is the main.
Okay.
Excellent.
Very good.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much, you guys. Thank you for coming.